Good morning. I'm Kristen Forster, and this is Crumbs Under the Table. I've been away for a week, so we're just getting going again now. It's also exceedingly windy where I am, so you can see my hair is very windswept in that kind of rugged poledark sort of way I like to think. Probably not. I'm back with the dogs, which is really nice. It was a great week last week. I had a good opportunity. I'll be posting a video up in the next day or so. I managed to get a great little interview with Greg Boyd, theologian and author, which kind of fits very nicely with the Jesus-centered theme, which is looking at how the cross makes sense of some of the violence of the Old Testament. Among other things, we were doing different bits. So anyway, I'll put that up. But this morning I'm back out. There's a verse in Proverbs which I always remember reading when I was much younger. It says, even if you're an idiot. I have a noisy dog. I'll turn you around so you can have a look. You can have a look at him. He's complaining because I'm not giving him attention. Do this. Yeah, one of those great verses. Proverbs likes to say it as it is. It says, even if you're an idiot. If you don't say too much, people think you're smart. I remember thinking that was... I'll talk in a minute. How long can you go on with that, Banjo? How long? What are we doing? Sorry, this is more entertaining, isn't it, than me? Okay, let's start walking this way. The only trouble is, I think I'm going to sit down again, actually, because I think the wind is so high that if I do walk, you won't be able to hear a thing. So I'm going to try. There's a nice little bit. There's a little bit of a cull here, where I think that's the right word, where it doesn't seem to be blowing quite as heavily. So I'm going to come back here. Even if you're an idiot, you can keep your mouth shut, and people think you're smart. And I remember reading it. It's probably about 17. I just got my Bible that I used today, thinking what a great piece of wisdom it was. And if anyone remembers it, there's the film, it's Peter Sellers' last film called Being There, which kind of really illustrated the truth of this verse. As I say, Proverbs are kind of funny like that. They can have this little pithy statement. You think, well, why bother to tell us that? But still, it's profoundly true. And in the film, there's he's an older man, but he's always grown up on an estate where he's been the gardener. So since he was a child, and he's never known anything else other than living on the estate. No parents, no other family. He's just quietly got on tending the gardens, and then the estate is being sold off, and he has to move out. He goes out into a world he doesn't understand. But says very little because he doesn't know how to communicate. But then when he does say something, he always uses a gardening analogy because he doesn't really know what the person's asking. So they ask a question or whatever, he uses a gardening analogy, and they think they interpret it as profound wisdom. And to kind of cut the long story short, he kind of ends up being nominated to stand as president, and you're left, you don't know whether he's going to be or not. But it was the way in which that kind of place of combination of silence and the few words he does speak lead everyone to think he's incredibly wise. So I always thought it was a kind of a good verse to live by, but I always missed the verse before. And now I've said that because I don't know the verse before in quite the same way. But actually, as I've done more in the kind of the developmental side and the psychology, to see where it runs into that verse. It talks about there is wisdom in few words. Thank you, Banjo, for getting tangled up there. There's wisdom in few words, and that if you're in charge of your kind of emotions, I think it goes along those lines. It's Proverbs 17. I think it's about 22, 23, around there. When I post these online on YouTube, I always put the verse reference, so I'll get it right there, so you can see what it is. I think it's Proverbs 17 is the chapter. I think it's about verse 22, 23. Where it kind of then says, so if you kind of keep your words few, there's wisdom in keeping your words few, and actually being in control of your responses. There's kind of real integrity in that. And I can't remember the exact kind of terminologies, but actually there is incredible kind of truth. It's one of the things that we actually kind of try and coach folks in. And there's an interesting sort of kind of two-way response that goes on. As we deliberately articulate, it actually changes the way we think about things. And so actually those that rush to speak very often lock themselves into a way of thinking. This is not opinion, this is kind of part of the way it works. It's because so there's a kind of interesting sort of phenomena. For instance, if you have a child who doesn't yet speak your language, and he's watching you do something, or he or she is watching you do something, if you make up a word as you pick up an object, and the baby's attention and ability to handle that object will be, it will last much longer and it will be hugely improved. And as they've kind of looked into the phenomena more, it seems that as we create a sound which is going to represent something, we put words to it, something happens in our brain. Our brains are wired to create language, so it's looking to associate things. But in the doing so, as we create language, we also kind of fix our ability to kind of see it. And so it's very important that actually we're not too quick to speak too fast and offer judgment too quickly, because as we offer judgment, we actually lock ourselves into seeing things the way we've just articulated it. And so there is actually, and this is therefore one of these wonderfully little profound verses that didn't know any of the psychology that we know now, but inadvertently is telling us exactly the same thing. We should take time to kind of more slowly consider before we start to put verbal sounds, i.e. words, to the judgments that we're making, because as we do that, our brain is actually locking us into seeing things in those ways. And that's one of the things that we find is the most profound when people get it, but it's also one of the hardest things to coach with folks, is how to listen in ways where you're actually developing understanding rather than just developing a response, developing an argument. Actually, it takes consideration, it takes time, and it actually requires us to stop talking. It requires us to use our imaginations in an emotional sense, to kind of emotionally put ourselves in the place of the person who's speaking. And so as we do some of those things, as we take people through kind of listening exercises, we kind of make listening, if you like, a more empathetic sort of thing until you get to the very end where you talk about real empathetic listening. Which doesn't mean that you listen so that you adopt the other person's position, but it means that you have understood it at its kind of wider level, more than just its verbal level. You're kind of involved in the emotional side of it as well. And as I say, it's not an easy thing to do, but it does actually require, just as Proverbs tells us, that we're slow to talk, that we actually consider things before we start putting our own words to the answers. Which is just one of those nice little bits. I always think I'm kind of always astounded by, the more I do the kind of this sort of developmental coaching side of things, is actually how much wisdom there are in things like Jesus' teaching in the Proverbs, that actually, although the ancient world didn't understand what we understand now about the way the brain is put together, by revelation they had captured words of wisdom that actually you can articulate very quickly. You can pass on to your children, say, try and be like this, and you'll do life better. And that is the truth of it. Being slow to speak, giving time to consider, giving time to kind of actually fully understand before we start to make it concrete, is just a wise way to live. And so this morning, because it's now raining on me as well, it's probably can't hear a word I'm saying because of the high winds all around me. So I'm not going to speak too long, but it is good to be back and just kind of encourage us to actually kind of embody some of those things. They're not about, they're not kind of in one sense moral issues, but they are wisdom issues. They are about doing life better, doing relationships better, actually seeing things more deeply. And the funny thing is, as we see things more deeply, the more we're able to appreciate them, the more we appreciate the things around us, the greater the sense and depth there is in our worship. As we kind of fully get it, as we fully see it. And so let's just take our time, slow our judgments down, not just kind of, I use that word, but actually just slow our words down. Because as we articulate, we are starting to shape our judgments. Take time to stop and think around the situation, feel it first, and then speak. And actually, in those kind of ways, we end up with far greater understanding. Banjo's still resting. I think his frustration is that the stick is quite big, and it's not easy to carry, is it? And you probably want me to help you, don't you? Yeah, he probably wants me to help him, and I'm just being too focused on this. There he goes. He's a happy dog. Right, off we go. You can tell that he's happy because the way his tail is really going in a circle. It's been really, actually, one of the things that was really nice while I've been away at Revive doing the seminars and things is how many people that I had no idea coming up. So I discovered that lots of people watch it on Facebook. Some people do watch on YouTube, which I knew those two. What I didn't know is I met my first person who actually watches me on Twitter. So the multi-streaming definitely is kind of worthwhile, I think. But anyway, we'll head on off. But loads of those people actually said, no, we watch it for the dogs. So I better make sure I give you plenty of time watching the dogs getting up to their antics. As usual, Luna is trying to dig something out of the ground that she wants to eat. I just noticed, I don't know if you saw that, but she definitely licked her chops, which means she probably found something. So anyway, that's all we'll say for today. So I'll say goodbye now and see you tomorrow. Bye.